Hey, it's Shane and Jeff with the Realest guys on the radio. How you doing?
How you doing? This is Jeff, and today we're talking about Daniel Bryan's retirement.
We are because he just ended up having to retire after almost 2 years of speculation. I mean, I suppose it's been a little bit less than a year since the last time he went out, but I've been kind of speculating ever since he was knocked for a loop after that Kane match at Extreme Rules 2014 that he would probably end up having to retire, and now here we are. Overall thoughts on it, Jeff?
You and I talked about this earlier this week, and about how you thought that they should have gone a different direction with his retirement. To be honest, I thought it was a class act by the WWE, and lately there's not been a whole lot that I've been high on the WWE about. But
No, you've been
I
high on a
thought
lot of
that
other things, but not
this,
WWE.
well, especially this Bud Light I'm drinking right now. But I thought that they honestly booked it perfectly. I thought that this was the right way to send out Daniel Bryan. I thought that giving him the ample time that they did, letting him lead not only the fans in Aberdeen, Washington, where his hometown, but also when you looked at it, the WWE roster, heel or face, they were all out there doing the yes chant too. And I know, people talked about this when Owen Hart had passed away, and you had Steve Austin, who was a bitter rival of Owen Hart at the time, storyline, was on the stage crying, and people badmouthed Steve Austin at the time because he was your enemy. How could you do that? And I thought at the time that was great of Steve Austin to go out and show, hey, you know what, we're putting on a character, but this man, I loved him. And I thought that was great with the whole roster being out there. Kevin Owens, who's the most despised heel in the game. Other people that had issues like the Authority and so on, Randy Orton, and everybody that was on the WWE roster was out there, and they were helping along with that yes chant. I thought it was a great send-off. I thought it was a great way to do it, and I love what they're doing with the Daniel Bryan Classic channel on WWE Network right now.
It's not that I didn't like the way they sent it off. I thought it was really classy also. I just thought that if they had had a heel that they really wanted to get over big as a heel, it would have been a great opportunity for them to do so. They may not have one right now. I mean, Triple H is already mega over. Seth Rollins, of course, is injured. Kevin Owens appears to be in kind of a holding pattern, at least until after WrestleMania, probably. And so then basically you have the option of basically using The Miz to come out there and try to become a monster heel again, the way he's been trying to do on the last couple of Miz TVs. Or you can try to fly in all the guys that you want to be in the Balor Club, assuming that's going to happen, and have them get over big as a heel. And I'm not even talking about any physicality, but just going out there to ruin Daniel Bryan's moment, I think would have gotten huge heel heat on them. But that would have taken some planning. It would have taken knowing what Daniel Bryan was going to do. It would have taken, having to take away Seattle from him. So all in all, it probably is a bad move to try to, shoehorn something like that in. I just thought, man, what a great opportunity to get heat on somebody.
I think it would have been a great opportunity, but who needs it at this point? You've got Kevin Owens, who is over as a heel big time. The rest of the Balor Club, they haven't even debuted yet. It's obvious they're going with AJ Styles as a face. There was really no heel on the roster that they needed to get over that badly to ruin a moment like that. And I've been really critical of WWE.
No, really?
I think their booking has been horrendous. I thought the way that they treated Daniel Bryan on his way up was horrendous. I hate the fact that they downplay and put down, and it's not so much that it's normal heel heat. What Kevin Owens does when he's screaming at Michael Cole to shut up, and he's telling people that they're not good enough, that's different than what they've done with AJ Styles, with Jerry Lawler downplaying every accomplishment he's ever had. And the same thing that when I was looking back, because I did a blog earlier this week about Daniel Bryan, just saying goodbye to him. And I thought one of the most surreal moments on the entire tribute that they had is when they went off the air with Raw and USA and they brought it over to WWE Network. And to see Michael Cole hug Daniel Bryan and just say, "I love you, kid." To me, that was one of the more surreal moments ever, because if you remember back in 2010 when Daniel Bryan was coming up, that was the beginning of Cole's heel turn, and he couldn't say enough bad things about Daniel Bryan and how nothing he's done has mattered. And at the time, Daniel Bryan was the king of the indies. He was the founder, founding father of Ring of Honor. He had been amazing in NJPW, and he was the king of the Indies. And Michael Cole did everything they could to trash him completely. And it was a surreal moment. And I've always hated that about why would you go out and buy and get this talent, sign him to this lucrative contract, and then trash him. It's never made sense to me. But I just don't know that there's anybody on the roster that really needed that kind of bump up to take away from that moment that he had.
No, that's what I was saying earlier. Is that I don't think there is anybody out there right now either. But I'm saying if they had someone in mind, that for a big heel push, that would have been a perfect opportune moment to do it. And it kind of passed them by. I think partly because they weren't prepared for it, and partly because they just didn't have anybody that would work. I mean, if Seth Rollins was coming back, I think we all know that the moment Seth Rollins comes back, he's going to get a big explosion of cheers. So if they want to keep him as a heel, they're going to need some kind of a big time thing to do, to get him in that spot. And this would, like for instance, like a perfect opportunity to do that. That's all I was thinking with it. As far as him coming in and being badmouth, I think that was simply, for the same reason, just to get Daniel Bryan over as a babyface and to get Cole over as a heel. And actually, Cole for for quite a while actually has been kind of singing the praises of Daniel Bryan. It's amazing how Jerry Lawler having a heart attack made me want him even less on my screen and made Cole turn from a babyface or from a heel to a babyface automatically.
Well, yeah, this is now the third time they've tried to make an actual play-by-play guy a heel, and it never works. And they tried it with Vince in the
I know.
90s.
I heard Cole as a heel. It's just that when Jerry Lawler had the heart attack, I think they felt like they couldn't do it anymore, or at least Cole didn't want to do it anymore.
And see, I never bought into it. For a heel announcer, they need to be the color guy. If you look back at the greatest heel announcers, they've always been the color guy. With Jesse Ventura was fantastic. Bobby Heenan might have been the best of all time. You look at Jerry Lawler now, and you see how tame he has become, and you forget just how great he was in the 90s. I was researching an article earlier this week, and I was watching some of the stuff that he did with Sable, the reaction that he had with the puppies and all of the stuff that he did. People just really forget how great of a color guy he was back in the late 90s. To what he is now, it's almost a shame. But I mean, I get it. He's not the same guy he was, and I think turning him heel at this point is a bad move by the WWE. But they.
Well, he had an interview where he was asked, "Why did you turn heel?" And he said, "Because if you're going to have a three-man booth and you're all saying the same thing, then two of those guys aren't needed." And so, the thing is, Mauro Ranallo was a fantastic, just absolutely fantastic play-by-play guy. So having him heel doesn't make any sense. And then that Rich, whatever, that's either paired with Lawler and Ranallo, he wouldn't make any sense as a heel either. And I agree with Lawler. There's no point in having a three-man booth if you're all saying the same thing. So I think it does make sense to have a heel on there. I'm not necessarily thinking it should be Jerry Lawler. I would have no problem at all with him retiring and that role being filled by somebody like, let's say, Corey Graves. But
yeah, and you and I talked about that earlier today. Is Corey Graves might be the best color guy in the business right now. I mean, not named Matt Striker anyway. Well, that's true. I mean, Matt Striker is not a color guy. He's a play-by-play guy. When you look at Lucha Underground, but you and I talked about that earlier today about Corey Graves, is that he has come a long way, and I think he right now is the standard for heel announcers and what they should emulate. He's a guy who supports the bad guys, but he has no problem saying, Enzo and Cass did a great thing there, or bad-mouthing. It was who was it on NXT?
It was All Red Everything, and Nia Jax said he said that was just classless, that was tasteless for him to come out and attack Carmella after the women's title match. Yeah, he wasn't afraid to call them on their BS, even though he's professed to be a big fan of All Red Everything.
Well, yeah, and they that's one of the things now about wrestling is that I think they're losing out on is it's no longer a heel face world. It's now a reality world. We want to see this. We want to think of this as a big fight, and we don't care if it's John Cena against Kevin Owens or Kevin Owens against The Miz. We want to see a good fight, we want to see a big fight, and we want to see it called like a big fight. We don't want to, it's not the same era that it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where there was clear-cut good guy, bad guy. The world isn't like that anymore, and I think the WWE might be a little bit behind the times on calling things like that. And we're getting way off our Daniel Bryan talk right now, but
That
back
never
to Daniel
happens.
Bryan. When you look at Daniel Bryan, yeah. Amazing that we're
Well,
getting
well,
off topic. How many
well,
times do we
well,
do
you know,
that?
I mean, you said that you think WWE has kind of lost touch in some things. Well, I think they lost touch completely with how the WWE audience wanted things to happen in 2013 going into 2014. They tried to, in a sense, recreate the Steve Austin story, forgetting that Austin didn't do too well from that either. And instead of giving the fans what they wanted, which was a Daniel Bryan title reign, an actual reign that they could get behind him in, they gave him like a minute and a half title reign at SummerSlam 2014, or excuse me, 2013, and then he got about a 1 month reign with the championship in right after WrestleMania 14 in 2014, WrestleMania 30, I guess I should say. And that whole time, people on the internet that were in my camp saying, this is bullshit. They should be putting the title on him. There was people on the other camp saying, no, no, no. They're telling a great story, and it's going to culminate at WrestleMania 30. Well, I think that both people happen to have gotten it right in that case. That they should have had the title on Daniel Bryan after SummerSlam 2013, in my opinion, for at least a few months, probably at least until Survivor Series, if not longer. And the people that said, well, it's going to culminate at WrestleMania 30 with a big win for him, ended up being right, although I don't think they were right when they first said it, because it was pretty clear up until the Royal Rumble of that year, where the fans basically revolted. WWE had no intention of paying off that story with the Daniel Bryan title victory.
Yeah, when I was thinking back about it too, I get it from a story perspective. It was what they thought. They were trying so hard to be the bad authority against the popular redneck, but the problem is they did it so wrong. If you remember back in the 90s, late 90s, when Steve Austin rose up, he rose up organically before he got into a feud with Vince. And then he got into this feud with Vince, and Vince, it was not he's a horrible wrestler, he's a horrible person, he can't do this, he's not talented enough. It was, I don't like you, and I don't want you to be my champion in the face of my company. And I think that's where the went wrong with the whole Daniel Bryan before WrestleMania 30 and after Survivor Series or SummerSlam, is they spent too much time bad-mouthing him, too much time making him look weak and telling him that he's not the guy that's good enough, not the guy that they don't want, the guy that's not good enough. I think that might have been the missed opportunity and where they screwed up what they were doing.
Well, I don't think the fans ever bought that narrative. I think people in WWE just had guys that they would rather have pushed ahead of Daniel Bryan, and the crowd basically just were telling them, no, you're not going to do that. And they finally just got fed up with it at the Royal Rumble when he wasn't even part of the Royal Rumble, and he wasn't. I think it's funny as hell that Rey Mysterio got his ass booed out of the building for being number 30 in that Royal Rumble. I haven't been a fan of Rey Mysterio for years. But yeah, I mean, I think WWE robbed us fans of an actual title reign by Daniel Bryan, and I have a hard time ever forgiving them for that, considering what happened afterwards. I'm not saying it's WWE's fault that he got injured, but if he'd been able to have a title reign where he was defending the title against Randy Orton rather than vice versa, and then he was defending the title against other guys, that would make sense storyline wise. If Kane had never turned on him and he had never had that match, maybe he doesn't get the first concussion and the neck injury that knocked him out of action for almost a year, and maybe we're not on this road. I think if WWE had just listened to the fans, things could have worked out a lot differently.
Yeah, and you might be right. I mean, hindsight 2020.
But you can say that, but I didn't have hindsight during that time. I said at the time on the radio when I was doing a previous show, in columns, to anybody who would listen, this is wrong. Daniel Bryan should be the champion right now.
Well, yeah, and I agreed with it at the time. I thought, but then again, from the start, I thought the way the authority storyline went, with the way they kept calling him a B+ player, was just, it was terrible. It wasn't good. It was bad from the start, and they missed a lot of opportunities. They did a lot of things wrong from the start. I think they could have handled that whole championship run better. Now, as far as Kane, and turning on him, at the time, I thought that was a fantastic move because he was moving on from he was moving on from Randy Orton. He had a 6 month feud with Randy Orton. I mean, granted, there was the big show, whatever happened there, but for the most part, it was a Daniel Bryan feud, Daniel Bryan Randy Orton feud from August until WrestleMania, and to move on from that, I thought they went the best way they could with having him against Kane, who at the time was a safe worker. He was somebody that could put Daniel Bryan over as a monster babyface because he turning on his partner was a huge thing. I don't know who else at the time would have been a good nemesis for him. At the time, it was right. I don't think Seth Rollins had even turned heel at that point. So there really wasn't any top heels in the business. You had Sheamus, who was still a face, and I think he might have been injured at the time. You had really nobody else that would have been considered a top heel that could have been in that spot. So I think turning Kane at that time was a smart move. The only problem I had with it was how they downplayed him throughout that entire time. It just seemed like he wasn't worthy of the championship, even though he was the champion. And we as wrestling fans all thought he was, but the average audience was like, "Who's this Daniel Bryan guy? What? They're saying he's horrible. Why is he all of a sudden now my champion?"
Well, I think a lot of it was just timing. Daniel Bryan won the championship at WrestleMania, and he got married like 5 days later. So he was out, and he was off Raw for about a week because of that. And then right after that, his dad died, and so he was off Raw for another week because of that. So it was like there was really only ended up being like a 2 week build to sell this Kane storyline, and I'm sure that didn't help much either. That he wasn't, probably wasn't able to train and be in the gym, all that kind of stuff during those 2 or 3 weeks, that time frame where he was, getting married, having a honeymoon, having his dad die, going to funerals, that kind of thing, And I totally get, that had to be done, but it was just, I think that that didn't help things. I think that the timing of everything else didn't help anything either, just because if you remember that at that time, that was when the whole Shield against the Evolution thing started. So the Evolution guys who had been in the title match against Daniel Bryan the night before, who really would have made more sense getting a rematch. I mean, Dave could have said, "Well, I didn't tap out and I won the Royal Rumble. I deserve a one-on-one match for the championship." Orton could have said, as he did repeatedly for months, that he never got his one-on-one rematch for the championship. And then, of course, Triple H could have demanded, another rematch because he can demand one anytime he wants to. He's the boss. And then they could have postponed the Evolution Shield thing for a month or two. And then the other thing was, Bray Wyatt had just beaten Daniel Bryan at Royal Rumble. He ended up having to job to John Cena at WrestleMania. But still, his victory over Daniel Bryan at the Royal Rumble could have qualified him to be a top contender, and then John Cena could have done something else for a month or two, instead of having his feud against Bray Wyatt, which was underwhelming to say the least. So I think there was other options available. I'm not saying that Kane was a bad option. It's just that it happened that his first title defense against Kane in a really dangerous match, and probably doing that huge, awesome dive bomb he did right from on top of the forklift, that the headbutt from the top of the forklift is probably what really caused it in that match, caused him to get that neck injury and the concussion at that time. And I just think it's unfortunate that they chose, I guess, that scenario for his first title defense when really they could have been doing it for the 6 months prior to that.
Yeah, I guess I kind of have to agree with you there. I mean, there were other options. I would have even had rather seen a John Cena Daniel Bryan match again. I thought their match at SummerSlam was an instant classic.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
And when you consider the amount of pain that, I mean, if John Cena had a bowling ball on his elbow, and he still was able to help with Daniel Bryan put on an instant classic. And I would have rather seen those two square up again. Because, if you think about it, if you want to go from storyline, John Cena never got his rematch. It went straight from Cena, Daniel Bryan had it for about 15 seconds before he got, lost it to Randy Orton. And it was the whole thing during that time, too, of not being a clear-cut champion. And how many times did they have that belt just up for grabs? it was like, oh, well, you guys are going to battle over it again because, well, there's no clear-cut champion. We don't want Daniel Bryan to be the champion, so we're just going to say there's no champion.
Well,
Right
I would say technically,
just,
Daniel. I would say technically you're right. John Cena never got a rematch for the WWE Championship, but he did come back from injury in his very first match back, win the world title from Alberto Del Rio, and then he got the match against Orton, where they were going to unify the World Heavyweight Championship. So I don't think you can say Cena never got a chance for the championship because he won the world title, and then the winner of him and Orton was going to be the first ever World Heavyweight Champion.
You know, and I don't know about you, and we're getting up to, I'm going to get up to Daniel Bryan here for a second again, but a lot of people hate the whole John Cena, Randy Orton storylines. They've been overdone and overabused, but I could never get sick of watching John Cena against Randy Orton. I think those two have always had great chemistry together. They've always had great matches. Their 60-minute Iron Man match that they had in 2009 still might be one of my favorites of all time. I think those two work really well together and have always worked really well together. And I wouldn't have minded seeing those two go on over the title for quite a while.
I'm sick of them working against each other. I'm sick of them both. I'm sick of both their work in general because they've been around for such a long time. But them against each other just puts a bad taste in my mouth because they're taking spots away from other people that could be wrestling against them. You know, other guys could be getting a rub by going against John Cena or going against Randy Orton, and instead those two guys are facing each other. Their match at Hell in a Cell in 2014 was excellent, but I really don't want to see those guys against each other again.
And I think a lot of that is because we are just sick of the fact that we're overdone with wrestling. I mean, you see these guys wrestle 6-7 times a month, and then they have a pay-per-view together, and it's like, okay, now we've already seen this match 5 times in the last 3 weeks. Why are we supposed to watch it again? I mean, I can see where people are burnt out. I can see why people are burnt out with John Cena. The fact that he's been the top dog since, 2005? You know, he's got 10 years as the top dog in the business, and people are just sick of seeing him when they see him 3 times a week for 10 years.
Exactly. You know, the WWE, in my opinion, should go back to the old way of doing things where there wasn't always, big-time matches throughout Monday Night Raw, and there weren't 12 pay-per-views a year or more. But again, like I said, we're getting off topic. So speaking of pay-per-views, I just want to say that I ended up watching WrestleMania 29 the other day, and in so doing, I realized that there was actually 4 consecutive WrestleManias where Daniel Bryan either went in as a champion, left as a champion, or both. If you think about it, WrestleMania 28, he came in, and that's when he lost in 18 seconds to Sheamus, but he was the world champion coming in. WrestleMania 29, he came in and left as the tag team champion. He was the tag team champion. Jeff, I am the tag team champions. You're supposed to say, no, I am the tag team champions. Man, how much fear have you had?
No.
Yes.
No.
And WrestleMania 30, of course, he had that match against Triple H to get into the triple threat, and he left with the World Championship. And then WrestleMania 31, he won the ladder match to win the Intercontinental Championship. So yeah, 4 straight WrestleManias. He either came in as a champion, left as a champion, or both.
And deservedly so. And like I said, we've gotten off topic way more than we probably should have in this whole thing, because this is a Daniel Bryan topic that we're talking about.
That's why I decided to say something positive about it.
When you think about Daniel Bryan and what he meant, I don't think that I've ever seen another wrestler connect with the audience the way Daniel Bryan did. You go back years, decades, and maybe the last wrestler to connect with an audience like Daniel Bryan was Dusty Rhodes. There's nobody that could have connected and nobody that will connect. And as much as we like Cesaro and Dolph Ziggler and other wrestlers, there's no way that the audience would have shut down shows for Dolph Ziggler. There's no way that the audience would have turned around complete storylines for Cesaro. As much as we love those guys, nobody ever connected with an audience quite like Daniel Bryan did, and that's something that really needs to be put to the forefront, because it's fascinating.
Well,
what he was.
Well, you can actually prove that a little bit more readily by then talking about Cesaro, we're talking about Ziggler, because they didn't do it for CM Punk. When Punk jobbed the championship over to Alberto Del Rio at SummerSlam 2011, people didn't like it, but there wasn't a riot about it. And then when Punk wasn't main eventing the pay-per-views as the champion, because John Cena was around him in main event pay-per-views without the title, there wasn't riots about it. When Punk dropped the title to a movie star and then lost again in a rematch to him, again there wasn't riots about it. And he was a very popular guy. I think Daniel Bryan is the exception, and I don't know we're ever going to see anybody that gets a reaction like he did.
Well, he's a generational talent. JBL's on the after show on the WWE network. He is a generational talent. There's not another person that's been around the last 20 years. And you can look at The Rock, you can look at Austin, you can look CM Punk during the summer of Punk. There's not been another wrestler that fans have gotten around to that extent since Dusty Rhodes. And we're going back to like 1983, 84. So that's a 30-year gap between wrestlers. Is it going to be another 30 years before we come across that kind of guy that can get the fans behind him to that level where they can alter shows and they can alter programs and just change everything about what's going on?
I think it could be that long, or it could be even longer. It could never happen again. I think there was just a conflux of events that happened here with Daniel Bryan and with the reality era and with social media, and I think that we were at a point where the internet just kind of spoke up and said, we want this guy to be the guy, and that kind of caught fire with the live audiences. And I don't know that we're ever going to see that again, partly because you don't really see indie guys coming in that already have that kind of huge following coming into WWE and then not going through the developmental system. I realize he did go through the developmental system, but there wasn't NXT at the time, so nobody could really see that development go on. I don't think it's going to happen with AJ Styles, not because AJ Styles isn't super talented, but just because I think he's a different type of a worker than Daniel Bryan is.
Well, and he's 38 years old too. He doesn't have the time to build that kind of following.
That's true. Although, if Undertaker can wrestle at 51, I don't see why AJ Styles has always been in better shape than him can't do the same.
That's a very good point.
But yeah, I mean, Daniel Bryan, I think was, you said a generational talent. I think he may be a once-in-a-lifetime talent. I just don't see a crowd ever getting behind somebody the way that they do Daniel Bryan. The yes chant's always going to be around, I think, because the crowd now uses it for other things. I think because it's so much fun to chant, and I think they'll do it in tribute to Bryan as well. But I don't think there's ever going to be a wrestler that captures the public's imagination the way that Bryan does.
I don't think there can be either. If you think about it, the reason Daniel Bryan was so popular is because not just, and say what you will, and I already said it, I hated the way the Authority treated him. But do you really think Daniel Bryan would have gotten to that level of popularity had the Authority not trashed him the way they did? And if you think about it, a lot of the reason why there were riots, a lot of the reason why there was this backlash with the yes chants and taking over the programs was because everybody felt like Daniel Bryan was being wronged. And I just don't know that, as much as I hate what the Authority did, I don't know how much of that played into what happened. I think you're right. I don't know if we'll ever see another guy that can capture the audience the way that Daniel Bryan did.
Yeah, I really don't think that we're going to. I think we've got about a minute left, Jeff, so I'm just going to throw this out here. Do you have a favorite Daniel Bryan match or a favorite Daniel Bryan moment?
There's so many.
I feel the same way. I mean, I can't pick out just one match or one performance because he was so great all the time in everything he did.
Well, that guy could he could do a 5-star match with a broom. It's just, if you want to see great matches, you can start with Ring of Honor in 2002 and work your way forward. Everything he did was phenomenal. Even losing in 18 seconds to Sheamus, he created essentially the yes moment at that time by his no chant that started from that moment. And it's everything that he's done, every match he's had. I don't know that we'll ever find another wrestler that's as talented, that's as good at his craft, and that can capture an audience the way Daniel
That
Bryan
was very
did.
well said. And actually, I think I'm going to pick out one moment just because it's so awesome. In ROH, I think that this was in 2003. He had a best of 5 series against Homicide, and there was one match in that best of 5 series where he had Homicide up in the airplane, spin and did a rotation 100 times with him.
Or what about his matches with Sami Zayn? Well, the one that comes to mind with me is the one where Sami Zayn was in a hugging mood. I don't know if you ever saw that.
I didn't see it.
Who was
no.
he at? He was
He
some
must
masked
have been El
wrestler
Generico
at the time. Yeah, he was Jericho, and he walked up to Daniel Bryan and just hugged him.
Oh,
Just hugged him. Beginning of the match. That's the way he started the match, was to hug him. There's just so many moments. He might be one of the few wrestlers like Ric Flair. I can go through and I can pick, okay, my favorite moment, favorite moment. Randy Orton, this is my favorite time. This is what I like. John Cena. Daniel Bryan, I cannot pick one moment because all of them were so great. It's just one that I can't
the only
do.
one that wasn't great was Daniel Bryan against the Shockmaster. I couldn't stand that one.